Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the fourth in our series of Smart H2 webinars. All the webinar series are looking at not how we just utilize hydrogen or how we use hydrogen within our demand or our energy chain to reduce our CO2, but how do we optimize hydrogen? How do we as a community and as technology and industry utilize hydrogen to meet our energy needs, reduce our CO2 footprint, and tackle the climate change? Those are the biggest challenges we face, not just across Europe, but across the world globally. Hydrogen is the catalyst to driving Europe's energy transition. How do we be part of that transition? And that's what the webinar series, GenComm, and all of the other partners we work with, how do we integrate into that energy transition to make sure hydrogen is that energy catalyst? How do we optimize the journey, delivering smart hydrogen through the development of a hydrogen supply chain, production, storage, and use to meet the future need, create a successful hydrogen Europe, and ensure that we have the hydrogen value chain right for each region that is utilised in. Webinar 4 in our GenComm Smart H2 series will examine how countries are scaling up, how we're optimising production from additional green hydrogen resources to meet current demand and meet future need, and how we develop that. I'm Paul McCormack, the GenComm Project Manager. We're looking at that hydrogen journey with our stakeholders, with our partners, with our community hydrogen forum, and making sure we take that journey together. Our agenda today is myself giving the introduction. I'm from Belfast Met and leading of GenComm, as I said. We have Dan McHugh, the editor of Renewable Energy Magazine in the USA, and Dan will talk about the USA hydrogen trajectory. Then we'll have Nigel Holmes from the Scottish Fuel Cell Association talking about how they're scaling up hydrogen supply and demand across Scotland. How hydrogen is the new oil of Scotland, how they're meeting that energy demand and using that to meet their future growth. Then we'll have Ian Williamson from the European Hydrogen Association talking about tidal and marine hydrogen production. It's a great opportunity for us all, folks, in this new world that we live in, this COVID-reduced world where we are in a digital-first format. You'll see the chat box down the right-hand side on your screen. Feel free to engage, to put up your questions, put up your comments. We want this webinar to be as interactive as possible, as with all our other previous webinars. We don't have the luxury of sharing a room physically with you, the audience, and seeing you and engaging with you and having those moments after the webinar over coffee that we're having chats and sharing the information. So we need to do it in the chat function. For those of you that are just joining, you're very welcome. We have this opportunity today to share, and that's making sure that we open those doors. The chat function is there. We have the GenComm team in the wings to be able to answer questions that some of the presenters may not answer and be able then to move that forward. It's about growing the European hydrogen awareness, how our hydrogen highway can grow and accommodate all of the people that we work with, all of the communities, and importantly, how we build those on-ramps. How best to engage in hydrogen? Where's your starting point? There's a lot of talk about it. There's a lot of traction about it. But how do we now develop that and work with you, the groups, and with others to make sure that hydrogen is that opportunity? Green hydrogen could supply up to 25% of the world's energy needs by 2050 and become a $10 trillion addressable market by 2050. Those are the stats from Goldman Sachs. Those are the opportunities. As businesses now post-COVID want to pivot their business models and look at new opportunities, that's the market size that's been predicted. How do we help you in the industry and communities scale up green hydrogen production? How do we help you utilize it to maximize those power to X opportunities, build new sector coupling opportunities with smart hydrogen as the catalyst? And how do we make that as essential to achieve zero emissions by 2050 and limit global temperature rises by 1.5 degrees? Those are the key challenges we face, and we face with everybody else and work together. In our Community Hydrogen Forum, which is headed up by the University of Galway, we engage with the public, the industry and communities and the public sector. Alexander Graham Bell, the inventor of the telephone, once said, "Great discoveries and improvements invariably involve the cooperation of many minds." That's what the webinar is about. That's what the Community Hydrogen Forum is about. How we as a group interact, exchange ideas, and how do we tackle our climate challenges and create a forum of communities, industry, experts, academia, institutions, and the public sector. You've all have read about the European Green Deal and the European President Ursula von der Leyen pushing post-COVID to have a green recovery in Europe. And there's a lot of effort, not just financial effort, but all of the legal effort and everything is put behind that to make sure that's going to be successful. How do we drive that? How do you, if you're not on that journey already, how do you start? Your starting point is there for you, the Community Hydrogen Forum. Engage in that. It's about opportunity, it's about information, and it's about the exchange of that information. We will not be able to answer all of hydrogen opportunities ourselves. We will do it as groups with industry, with large industry that's already there, and how we make that just transition across to a new Europe. We talked earlier at the start, how we now engage with you, the audience. We have a poll there for you, and this gets you on your feet. It keeps you away from answering your emails or answering your mobile phone whilst keeping one eye on the screen. At the start of all of our webinars, we have a small poll. That poll gets you to start thinking and gets you on your virtual feet. So our question to you this morning, the audience, is how important do you think green hydrogen will play in achieving net zero by 2050? The poll is there on the screen for you. Will it play a significant role? Will it play a key role but not overly significant? Will it only play a minor role? Or importantly, will it play a key role, especially in areas to be accessed? Have a look at that. Or if you have another answer, don't be afraid to put it into the chat function. So how do you, in your role, if the audience is there this morning, see that what part does hydrogen fit? Where do you see it fitting? Maybe you're already working in this industry and you see it as key, or maybe you're still learning and you want to see there's more. So over the next minute or so, let's have a look at that and see what your thought process is and see what you think. Where will green hydrogen sit? And we're specifically asking about green hydrogen. On our journey to net zero, there will be a lot of what I call, and what we call high energy transition stages, where other energies, as long as they have a lower CO2 than fossil fuels, will play a key role. Because it's a transition to net zero. It's not going to be a step jump. And we've got to make sure all of the assets are not stranded as we move along. For those companies involved in fossil fuels and that, how do we repurpose their assets? Those communities at the end of the supply chain, how do we put them at the start of the energy chain? And those are the key roles. So folks, you're on your feet already, and over half, almost 60% think hydrogen will play a significant role. It'd be disappointing if it was anything less, because given that the feature of this webinar is hydrogen and demand, use and future production. So at least you're there. People are saying that there's 20% say a key role in areas yet to be accessed. I'd be interested just to see what your thoughts are on that. And a key but significant role. So as the speakers come through today, we'll ask them to keep that in mind as they give their presentations. It gives them a bit of focus on you, how the audience are thinking. In a traditional webinar, we'll be looking at this, and you can see if the front row we're sleeping or the second row we're daydreaming, you would change the pace of your presentation. We don't have that luxury in online webinars, so we use these polls to do that. So folks, thank you very much for your time on that. 56% of you think that hydrogen is going to play a significant role. In smart hydrogen is a phrase that we use in GenComm with our partners in ETSIS, with our partners in Pure Energy, Energia, TK Renewables and High Energy, with all of other partners, with Galway and all the other academic partners. It's not just about hydrogen, it's how we use hydrogen smarter and better. How do we look at optimizing green hydrogen to deliver increased benefits across all of the value chain? How do we accelerate cost reductions for production, transmission, distribution, retail, and end applications to make sure communities are there first? The GenComm acronym is about generating energy secure communities, making sure the community is empowered and enriched to take charge of their own destiny, to give them the opportunity. You all have seen it in different times during storms, and that those at the end of the grid are the first to lose power and the last to regain power. How do we redress that imbalance by using hydrogen as that key energy vector? And that's where we use the phrase, the smart hydrogen. Hydrogen up to 2050. Today's webinar is looking at demand, use and future production. How do we make that transition a reality? I've said at the start, it's not going to be up to one or two groups. Everybody needs to play their part. The International Energy Authority are looking at this, all of the different European governments. Many have already produced hydrogen strategies and hydrogen trajectories and their roadmaps. We're working with the different regions to inform and shape their hydrogen uses. How do we, through our pilots and you, through the audience engagement, this is a two-way street. How do we use your information and share that, and vice versa, to make sure we get to that destiny we need and make sure we get where we're going? As I said earlier, folks, we have the chat function there. We're interested in your views and everybody else's. As Terry Medill says, the government needs to do more to educate HGV operations. Those are the key roles. Transport mobility are the low-hanging fruit. Moving beyond that, how do we use it within industry? How do we then use it within green heating and decarbonising the heating system? As we talk about smart H2, I've mentioned there about the world is all racing to green hydrogen. There's a lot of hype, there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of lack of transparency. How do we get through that? Webinars such as these and the Hydrogen Ireland Association, the European Hydrogen Association, the Scottish Fuel Cell Association, how do we use those as key information points to cut through the noise where people can get real opportunity and real information? Along that hydrogen value chain of production, conversion, transmission, distribution and use, how do we make those moves smarter? How do we produce not just commercial value at each stage, but environmental value at each stage and social value? So those three trajectories are all matched as we move down that value chain and giving us smart H2, not just an energy, but an opportunity where that just transition can move. One of the other projects we're working at is looking at hydrogen-enabled zero-emission supply chains. How do we take the CO2 out of all of the supply chain in industry and commerce, and looking at Hazel to produce those opportunities within low-carbon heating pumps right through to industry, and making sure that mix of academia and industry are there, arriving at solutions and moving forward. As we look forward to 2030, all of the technology that's there, the International Energy Authority believe the technology is ready in place to meet the 2030 goals. So the technology that's developed for low carbon will get us as far as 2030, but the step from 2030 to 2050 is significant. And those new applications, the fourth part of the question at the start in the poll, those new applications have yet to be discovered, yet to be developed, and yet to be deployed. So how do we play our part in that? And that's where Hazel comes in. As we look forward in that gap 2030 to 2050, we use a phrase in GenComm, and it's from our partners, Dr. Bodo Gross in ITSIS. How do we look at a hydrogen tower or a hydrogen escalator? As we move up the value chain, how do we extract the full environmental, social, and commercial value out of hydrogen at every step? One of the strengths of hydrogen is its versatility, both in terms of production across technologies and use by industry and individuals. And also it has potential in storage for backup medium at times when intermittent renewables is increasingly dominating the electricity system. That intermittency will grow as more renewables come online the next 5 to 10 years. Hydrogen will play a key role in balancing that grid and moving that forward and bringing us to a new fulcrum where energy plays that role. As we move forward to the new, what we call the new energy normal post-COVID, that green recovery that Europe is producing and Europe is pushing, Ursula von der Leyen and the associates there in the union, making sure that the trajectory is there, there's clarity, and there's legislation to back it. It's not just finance, legislation is there. So business as usual, pre-COVID is no longer an option. A lot of companies now will look post-COVID and see that their markets have changed, demand has changed. How do we help them pivot and how do we help them move forward? I'm looking at the chat there, and Paul Monaghan from Monaghan is coming on board. One of the opportunities we're talking with them is, how do we look at the aggregates industry? How do we look to green that and move that forward? Because the emissions from all of the different troubles and all of the different earth movers are just as the same as the emissions from buses and cars. How do we help them move that forward with a hydrogen answer and making sure that we green the aggregates industry as well as everything else? So there are different needs and different opportunities as we move. How do we increase our pace towards net zero? We can't keep going at the pace we're going because we're not going to hit the target by 2050. So therefore, the pace and the rate of change must increase and must match what we're doing. And those gaps, 2030 to 50, those new technologies, those new applications need to come online. They're currently being developed. They're talked about in Galway and DCU and all of the other academic partners that we work with. How do we make those mainstream? How do we bring them in? Part of that work is our own work here with DAFE, the Department for the Economy in Northern Ireland, and with the Irish government, and with other legislation across Europe through the Hydrogen Association, through the European Hydrogen Association, is influencing, lobbying and shaping, making sure that we are able to meet the climate change targets, address that fundamental change, but share the challenge where everybody has the role to play and everybody must be able to address that. One of the big projects we worked on in the past and continue to work on with Bosch in Germany, with our plant in Hamburg, just outside of Saarland, and with our team in ITSIS, Dr. Bodo Gross and Wolf Clemens, is smart hydrogen. Using the generation and consumption and closing that circle to make sure there's zero CO2 emissions and we're able to use all of the energy, all of the opportunity. And we look to that vision of 2030, the sector coupling, to make sure we address the needs of industry, transport, and the fuel cells by making sure we balance that. Those are the key roles, those are the key challenges as we move forward. Another project we're working on is in direct relation to Hydrogen Europe, or Horizon Europe, the calls that are coming out in the minute. How do we look to optimize hydrogen by developing a hydrogen optimization support tool? For those that want to go down that track, how can we support them? Hydrogen, the catalyst driving Europe's energy transition. How do we help those optimize that journey by valorizing of the hydrogen supply chain, production, storage and use, and create a successful Hydrogen Europe? Extensive development and demonstration of skills is optimizing green hydrogen, and we are there to support that. In our GenComm project, we have developed a decision support tool, a DST. We are now in phase 2 of GenComm, being led by Galway, University of Galway under Dr. Roy Monaghan, moving to an enabling support tool to enable people to use hydrogen. Our next goal is to go to the hydrogen optimization support tool, building those tools that people can use to move them further down that value chain and increase the opportunity.